ढूंढोगे अगर मुल्कों मिलने के नहीं नायाब हम ढूंढोगे अगर मुल्कों मिलने के नहीं नायाब हम ढूंढोगे अगर मुल्कों ढूंढोगे अगर मुल्कों मिलने के नहीं नायाब हम ताबीर है जिसकी हसरतों गम ताबीर है जिसकी हसरतों गम ऐ हम नफसो वो हाल हैं हम ढूंढोगे अगर मुल्कों मिलने के नहीं नायाब हम ढूंढोगे अगर मुल्कों ऐ दर्द बता कुछ तू ही पता ऐ दर्द बता कुछ तू ही पता अब तक ये मुअम्मा हल ना हुआ ऐ दर्द बता कुछ तू ही पता अब तक ये मुअम्मा हल ना हुआ हम में है
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to honor Asma Jahangir as this memorial service that we originally were calling a memorial service, and then we called it a remembrance, and then we decided to call it a celebration. It says remembering Asma Jahangir, but on the Facebook page we changed it to celebrating Asma Jahangir because we want this to be an uplifting, celebration of her. And also, if you see any seats empty, please fill them up so that there aren't people. I think there's a seat up front if somebody would like to sit on. Anyway, I wanted to just. My name is Beena Sarwar. I'm a journalist from Pakistan, and I'm from Karachi, but I was in Lahore for several years, which is when I first met Asma. And I already knew of her, of course, because I was part of the Women's Action Forum. As a student in Karachi, and when I came to Lahore, I got to meet her because I started doing voluntary work as a journalist, reporting and report writing and volunteering with the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan that she had founded in 1987. And the issues that the Human Rights Commission took up, I think that's created, and the way that Asma formed this institution, I think it's helped to create what I like to think of as Asma's tribe. So I think all of us here are part of Asma's tribe, and I think the fact that the thousands who went to her funeral in Lahore, the people who, there was a huge event in Delhi the other day, and there are events happening all over India and all over Pakistan and in other countries of the world to honor Asma. And a lot of people who don't even know her are so moved and inspired by her. After she passed, I talked to a lot of friends in Lahore who had attended her funeral and also who had not been able to. And the one thing that everybody said at the end of our conversation after we cried and laughed together was that we will not stop. We will take her work forward. And it's a difficult time for us because we've lost somebody who meant a lot to us. Not just to those of us who knew her personally, but like I said, I've been talking to people who didn't even know her. And one of the reasons perhaps is that she took on these issues and the themes that she took up, rule of law, due process, and the democratic political process. And she upheld these three principles and justice for all across the board. So whether it was the blasphemy issue, peace with India and Pakistan, she's a co-founder of the Pakistan-India People's Forum for Peace and Democracy. She's a co-founder of the South Asians for Human Rights. She's done UN rapporteur work. Everybody knows all the work that she's done. So we have so many people who wanted to pay tribute to her, and everybody's names are not people who are speaking. They're not all on the program, but we have them lined up, and I want to actually hand over the mic to a young lawyer who's doing his PhD at Brandeis, Yasser Qureshi, and I'll ask him to introduce all the speakers, and we're all going to try and take very little time, and at the end I'll come up and try and sum up a little bit. And if there's time and other people want to say something, we can do that, but I don't know how much time we'll have because, as you can see, it's a full hall, and everybody is feels very strongly about Asma, so even if those who don't get to say a word. We have index cards, as you might see on the counters in front of you, so you could write down what Asma means to you, why you are here, what's your connection to her, and if you write your name and some kind of contact details, then we'll try and keep this sort of Asma's tribe a little bit connected and also get these messages across to her family and friends in Lahore. So I'm going to hand it over to Yasser, and then we'll just move forward. Thank you.
To meet Asma Jahangir, but it's hard to escape Asma Jahangir's impact, whether you're in Pakistan or abroad, given her presence and impact across the world. And I've always found her to be such an inspirational figure. So just as a graduate student studying about how at the age of 20, Asma Jahangir stood up in the courts, challenged the dictatorship of Yahya Khan successfully, and managed to get our country its first decision against a military dictatorship and a coup, was in itself awe-inspiring. And since then, she's been on the front lines, resisting almost every threat to Pakistan's vulnerable populations. And more than anything, I think the way Asma Jahangir has lived her life, for me, emphasized the importance of engaging with the power structures, that she wished to change, rather than, condemning them from a comfortable and convenient distance. And she chose to engage with the politics of the state and try to change with it that way. And in recent years, for me personally, what was most intriguing and fascinating was how she played a key role in Pakistan's bar associations. In the face of the threat of judicial overreach, her response was to wade right into the politics of bar associations, run for elections, win and become the first woman president of the Supreme Court Bar Association in Pakistan. And then she created a political coalition within the bar and used that as a platform to check and hold an increasingly powerful judiciary accountable. And this is just one of her many achievements that we're going to hear about probably today, and that I'm sure you all know about. Because time and time again, she dug into the trenches and faced down the scorn, stigma, and danger and violence that comes with fighting for progressive causes in Pakistan's political terrain. Personally, I'd always wanted to meet Asma Jahangir. And I finally gotten her number last summer to get in touch with her, to interview her for my dissertation. But unfortunately, she had to leave town at that time. But when I spoke to her, she said we can definitely meet the next time I come to Pakistan, which was this summer. But unfortunately, that wasn't to be. I wish I could have met her and learned from her and her experiences and perspectives. But we are very fortunate to have with us today people who knew her, who have, and learned from her, so many fine scholars, artists, and activists, and professionals who did know her, and we would love for them to share a few words with us. We do request the speakers to keep their remarks within 5 minutes, and tell us about your personal connections to Asma Jahangir. And we hope this event will be uplifting and inspiring, even as we grieve her departure. And for the rest of us, we do also have, as Veena said, index cards for everyone to write their thoughts and memories of Asma, which we can collect at the end. So with that, I'd like to call on our first speaker, Mahmud Jafari, the CEO of Jogar Rug and Home. Thank you.
Thank you, Yasser, for a very brief introduction.
All of them are only that brief.
I think we should be giving time and celebrate the life of Asma. She was a friend of mine, and I had always supported her cause. Being a Shia Muslim in Pakistan, being a friend, the rights for women, those were all important issues to me. She stood a smidgen over 5 feet, had fine delicate bones, but the bird-like frame contained a courageous heart, an indomitable will, and unflagging social conscience. The death of Asma Jahangir, the Pakistani activist, lawyer, and human rights campaigner, who passed away on Sunday after suffering a cardiac arrest at her home in Lahore, has left a nation reeling with a profound sense of loss. When I heard the news of her death, my first thought, regrettably, was myself. Who will have our backs now? I was not the only one. A legal watchdog and a political fighter, Jahangir patrolled the rights of secular liberals, religious minorities, the politically disenfranchised, wronged women, abused children. She even fought for the constitutional rights of the very same religious extremists and hard-right nationalists who would have had her silenced. She was a living testimony to the difference one person can make in our struggle for respect and dignity in our collective lives and against impunity suffered by those on the margins. She altered the prospects of human rights defenders, women's rights, prisoners, the place of human rights in society. For all her skills, she had a singular disability. She could not comprehend the word fear. Undaunted by attacks, she suffered house arrest, imprisonment, and challenged those who could have wanted to silence her. She never retreated from the barricades. I would like to share with you a letter that was written by a young lady who attended the funeral of Asma in Lahore. I quote her, "As I walked today into the stadium of Asma Jahangir's funeral, I initially couldn't spot any women. I hesitated and tried to remember the logistics of death. Do women even attend public funeral prayers? What if they ask me to leave? Then quickly sanity returned. Would Asma Jahangir be having these thoughts? Never. She'd charge right in. So I channeled her. When, as I know, I will many times after today, stood up a little taller and walked in." And of course, there were so many women. Many were lawyers, a sense of solidarity. We asked each other where the women's enclosure was, expecting any minute to be directed away from where her body was kept, to a separate female enclosure. There was none. Of course, as we crowded around the front, women and men announcements began about starting the namaz, and again we expected to finally be told to step back from lines behind the men. But instead, the men were asked to move back from lines behind the men, and the women called to the front. We prayed like that, standing next to some men, in front of others. No one objected. How dare they? It was beautiful, so fitting. I should have known. How could the woman who charged alone, quite literally, into the male bar rooms, courtrooms, into all sorts of hyper-male spaces, continents, that the women who came to say farewell to her, their hero, be shunted to the back. Such beautiful subversion in death as in life. Farewell, Asma. Rest in power. Kishwar Nahid, another dear friend and a common friend to me and Asma both, wrote a wonderful poem that she just recited a few days ago at one of the services that was given in her honor. And I hope some of you understand, or all of you understand, Urdu poem or Urdu literature. If you don't, then learn Urdu. This is Kishwar Nahid. दुनिया सोचती थी और हैरान होती थी, क्या कभी सूरज मगरिब से निकलेगा? क्या कभी दांतरी से घास काटती औरत कभी आसमान पर सितारा बन के चमकेगी? क्या ये भी होगा कि अंगूठा लगा के अपना हक दे देने वाली औरत दुनिया के सामने अपना हक मांगेगी? वो मुनहनी सी औरत अस्मा जहांगीर जिसने हुक्मरानों को ललकारा हो, जिसकी आवाज पे बांदी बनी औरतें हों या ईंटों के भट्टे पे गुलाम दर गुलाम खानदान हों, ऐसे खिंचे चले आए जैसे रक्स करती हुई हवा, जैसे झूलती हुई टहनियां, जैसे खुशबू छलकाती बहार। वो मुनहनी औरत मेरी आसमा जहांगीर सलीब से भी इंसाफ के तराजू को उतरवा लेती थी। जमीन पर राज करते हुए खुदाओं को ललकारती, बेड़ियों को पाजेब में बदलती, दरवेशी की चादर ओढ़े तारीख सियासत के पर्दे चाक करती, वाइजों और फतवा फरोशों को बेनकाब करती, खजादार चेहरों को बहारें पहनाती, मुस्कुराती रहती थी। वो मुनहनी औरत अस्मा जहांगीर आस्तीन के कातिल बेरहम निशानों के निशान भी तलाश कर लाती थी। जब्त की दहलीज खामोशी के लिए 1000 सजदे करे, जब्त की दहलीज खामोशी के लिए 1000 सजदे करे, मगर वो तो उस आवाज में बात करती थी कि उसकी बाज़गश्त आलम हक में मौतबर ठहरती थी। सलाम ए मुनहनी औरत, ए मेरी आसमा जहांगीर, तूने इस मुल्क के अंधेरे में कंदील रोशन की है, वफा की, सलामत हक की, हिम्मत कुफ्र की और जज्बा अवान की। और दुनिया सोचती थी क्या कभी सूरज मगरिब से निकलेगा? दुनिया देख ले, सूरज मगरिब से निकला था। ऐ मुनहनी औरत, मेरी आसमा जहांगीर, सारी दुनिया तुझको सलाम पेश करती है। शुक्रिया।
You may all wonder, what is this Iranian woman doing among all these wonderful Pakistani friends? But I have to tell you, as an Iranian admirer of Pakistan, a few years ago, when we went to Pakistan for several years, and just before we went there, I was thinking that I have dual nationalities. I'm Iranian and I'm American. Only to get to Pakistan and to get to know Pakistan and to get Pakistanis, whom I call my rishtadar, but then I started thinking that indeed I'm very lucky. I have 3 homes, and now I know that I belong to the tribe as well, and I am very proud of it. Again, being an Iranian, you cannot begin a celebration like this without thinking of a poem. Of course, I'm not going to ask you to remember Persian, to learn Persian, but I'm going to start with a Persian poem. And that is from Sa'di, the 13th century Persian poet, who was a treasure house of philosophical and practical wisdom. And he says, Sa'di o mard nekunam namirad hargiz, murde an ast ke namash be nekuyi nabarand. O Sa'di, a person with a good name never dies. A dead person is one whose name is not remembered fondly. And here we are celebrating Asima's life. Now, what can I say today? It's hard to think that Asma, with her vitality and zest for life, is no longer with us. I think many of us will remember the moment we heard of her unexpected death. It was painful. I will never forget that moment when I heard the news on NPR. What? I thought, how could she not be among us anymore? She was a force of life. It's hard to imagine not hearing her voice again, not seeing her again. That courageous woman, and to realize that fearless and powerful woman is no longer with us. That unarmed girl, to quote Habib Jalal, because of whom light of courage was shining, was spreading. 2 years ago, I remember I was in Lahore and I had a lovely and lively evening with Asma, her husband, and her lovely daughter, Aliza. Our conversation was mostly about the complicated political situation in Pakistan, what else, of course. And among them was about Benazir Bhutto and her legacy. That night, I remember when I brought up some professional women's objections to Benazir wearing the scarf, Asma became impatient and said, quote, "For God's sake, I disagreed with her putting on a dupatta. It was not necessary. But anyway, she did it and felt secure doing it. It did not mean that she became compliant and conservative, not at all," end of quote. Reflecting back on that evening, I admired Asma even more. She was not just a courageous and fearless woman, one who brilliantly navigated the intricate and winding corridors of justice in Pakistan, but one who was very wise. She was very wise and disciplined person, a fair and compassionate woman. She had that ability, like an excellent and disciplined lawyer that she was, to understand the complexities and enigmas of real life. That is what I admired most in Asma. She was fearless, but not reckless. She was courageous, but not foolhardy. No wonder she was selected to be the UN Human Rights Rapporteur in Iran. That's where another connection. That small woman with a booming voice had no fear of speaking truth to power. I remember Asma with great fondness and wanted to celebrate her life with you. I want to end my brief remembrances of her by reciting a line from another Persian poet by the 17th century Kalim Kashani, who has captured the mystery of life and the meaning of love so profoundly and powerfully. I will first read this poem again in Persian and then try to translate it in English, and you'll see how hopelessly I'm lost in translation. Let me try that. افسانه حیات دو روزی نبود بیش آن هم سلیم کلیم با تو بگویم چسان گذشت یک روز صف بستن دل شد به این و آن روز دگر به کندن دل زین و آن گذشت. The story of life happened only in 2 days. O Kalim, I shall tell you how they passed. One day was spent becoming attached to this person and that. The second day was spent in saying goodbye to them. Hard though it is to think that Asma is no longer among us in person, she is here today in this hall, watching us over and listening to us. Her indomitable spirit will be with us today and forever. Thank you.
So anyway, when I was growing up in Pakistan in the 1980s, my parents spoke about two women. One, of course, became the Prime Minister, and the other person was Asma Jahangir. I didn't realize or understand at the time what she meant or what she was standing for. And as I grew up, I understood it, and then the marathon happened, and we were part of the lawyers' movement after that. The marathon, I don't know if you remember, she was savagely beaten up during the marathon, but she kept going on. It was a mixed marathon. And I remember picking up the newspaper, and I think I've never and I'd still not met Asma at this point. And I don't think I quite had that kind of bang in my heart ever till I actually saw that picture. And then the lawyers' movement, she was part of it. And then she stood up, and this is a person who spoke truth to power, as the previous speaker said. She spoke truth to power since age 18. That is when she went to the Supreme Court against a dictator. Then she was against another dictator under General Zia, which was by far the worst dictatorship possible, in our country, and the kind of religious ordinances that were brought about by that dictator, which basically disenfranchised and marginalized women and minorities. She was up there standing, beaten up on the roads. So this was the kind of woman she was. And you can imagine there was another woman in the 1980s who was part of the Zia administration, Apa Nisar Fatima, and she persecuted her. For those of you who are familiar with that history. But now today the Interior Minister is Apa Nisar Fatma's son, and he actually paid her a glorious tribute. So you see, ultimately, what Asma said 10 years ago, everybody accepted 10 years later. For me personally, I've met Asma a couple of times, and there was this time when the very first time she actually called me. I just got a call, I picked it up, and I heard this voice, and I was terrified, because she was just, and she's like, meet me in the bar room tomorrow. And this was regarding a case which I won't talk about, but, and so we met, and, she was the most reasonable person, and she was sort of, from what I could gather, she was extremely humble in sort of getting, and she's like, if you look at it this way, it would make more sense. And, you couldn't help but agree with her. And then, since 2010, we lawyers have been in Pakistan. This is why I'm not wearing this black suit for, as a mourning thing, but I'm wearing the black suit because, this was the dress. This is the dress that Asma wore. This is the dress that we wear. So I wear it in tribute to this great mother of ours. I consider her a mother of all strategic and impact litigation in Pakistan. Of making a difference, of using constitutional fundamental rights and fighting the good fight. And then since 2010, she was the, whoever she endorsed in bar elections is the person we voted for. And often her candidates won, because that was sort of the grip that she had on our collective consciousness. We believed that whatever she said was true. And so when I woke up last Sunday, and I heard the news, it was an extreme shock, just finding out, because if there is any time that Pakistan needed her, even more than General Zia's time, if there is any time that Pakistan needed her, it's at this time, because she's the one who has consciously, very clearly, consistently spoken against this idea, not just of judicial overreach, which is there, and Asma's right. The best law school in the world is, around the corner. You can go talk to any professor. They'll tell you that what Asma Jahangir said about the judgment, the Akama judgment, the Panama judgment was right. So she was sort of showing us the way, and there's no one now, no one left. So, I mean, I can't, I'm so honored that you asked me to even speak here. But I'm speaking because this profound sense of loss that we feel, I don't see another Asma right now, but I know that there are enough people she's inspired, and that we will have many like her in the future. So I just want to say goodbye, Mother.
Thank you, Yasser. It's such a deep honor to be included in Asma's tribe, and to be asked to pay homage to her today. And special thanks to Bina Sarwar for inviting me. My remarks will focus on the day that Asma and I played hooky. Not from school, but from a conference in Stockholm, Sweden. It was the first time I had met Asma, but of course I knew about her work. And both of us had spoken on the first day of the conference and had gotten to know each other, and Asma allowed that she would actually like to see Stockholm, and I happily agreed to be her companion. So we skipped the second day of the conference, and we walked around old and new Stockholm, stopping for coffee and lunch, and engaged in a very deep conversation. And I should explain, since our Iranian friend explained her connection to Pakistan, I should say that my paternal grandparents went to what is now Pakistan in 1916. So my family has had 100 years association with Pakistan. So we discovered we had a lot in common. Education in Christian missionary schools and colleges, parents committed to secularism and democracy, a love of Urdu language and poetry. But what really sealed the friendship was the discovery that both of us had been involved in the struggle of East Pakistan against the military dictatorship and then the military crackdown of the government of Pakistan. My husband Lincoln, who's here, and I were in Pakistan and were witness to the military crackdown, documented what we saw in the US congressional record and fought for the US recognition of Bangladesh. But it was Asma in her teens who joined her father, Malik Ghulam Jalani, in denouncing the military crackdown in Pakistan. And it was her father who went to jail, and as we've heard, it was Asma who got him out of jail, so to speak. Asma lamented while we were talking that the government of Pakistan, supported by the government of the US, was still promoting military solutions to security concerns with a disregard for the rule of law, human rights, and democracy. She worried that concerns, sort of military concerns about security, were undermining a commitment to democracy. And she truly believed that the rule of law, human rights, and democracy would lead to ultimate security. So since our day together in Stockholm nearly 20 years ago, I have followed Asma's fearless defense of human rights, secularism, the rule of law, and democracy in her beloved Pakistan and around the world. I remain in awe of her bravery in the face of beatings, imprisonment, and death threats. But what I will always treasure in my heart is the memory of the day we played hooky in Stockholm, Sweden. Asma, may your brave soul rest in peace. Khuda Hafiz, dear friend.
Thanks, Yasir, and thanks, Veena, for doing this. I'm truly honored to be here. Not so, both the idea of remembering a towering figure who's played a very important role in my own personal and professional development, but also the fact that I'm meeting so many friends who knew her and who were connected to her. In 1991, I graduated from the LSE and I went back to Pakistan, and I started an internship with the Awan Foundation, again a center for advocacy and rights advocacy, started by a group of amazing women, Nigar Ahmed and Shaila Zia. And I was a young intern, 20 years old, and there was an incident in Punjab. A woman had been gang raped, and there was a civil society protest being organized. And as a first step, we all thought that it would be important to go to the IG police, who heads the Punjab police, and protest. And I was, tagging along with these luminaries. And we were in the IG's office, and the IG, being the IG as the South Asian police is, made a deeply sexist remark, saying that the woman's character was not good, and therefore, in short, saying that she asked for it. And the moment he uttered that, Asma Jahangir stood up, and she said that you better watch your words and change your mindset, otherwise I'm going to get you. Tumhari vardi utarwa denge hum, which is that we'll get you out of your office. And then the guy said, oh, main tumhe dekh lunga, which means I'll fix you. And Asma said, main tumhe dekh lungi, aur hum tumhe dekh lenge, tumhe yahan se bahar nikal ke phekenge. And the IG got further, he said, acha ye, and I was trembling. I said, my God, they would arrest her and me as well, because you were part of this protest. And there was this amazing fearlessness. I'd never experienced that in my life, because in Pakistan we are, let's face it, we love and worship power. People want to join the civil services, people want to hover around people who have power and money, and to express and demonstrate this kind of courage was truly inspirational for me. And we got up, and Asma and her sister Hina Chelani, who was another stellar fighter for rights, They chanted IG Kuta, hi, hi, and it went on half an hour. Outside the IG Punjab's office, the most powerful head of police who could basically do anything to protesters. And since then, that was my first meeting and interaction. And through the last decades, I not only got to know her much better, she has been a very important part of my entire sort of understanding of Pakistan, of myself, of what we should be as conscientious citizens, and what is the true idea of patriotism. Asma taught us and our generation all of that. There is no person who has demonstrated this kind of unadulterated courage and the ability and the tenacity to stand up against an array of injustices. It's not just women's rights or minority rights. It's about extrajudicial killings. It's about missing persons. It's about brick kiln workers, juveniles, the prisoners. I mean, you name it. The list goes on and on. And she won all these battles. It is not that she was just another advocacy group formed by a foreign-funded NGO, and they would issue a report. No, she actually went to these lower courts. She went and faced these judges and police officials who often thought that she was either, a troublemaker or some sort of unpatriotic woman, and she braved it all. And not only that, she also left a legacy in very clear institutional terms. She built AGHS, which is a legal aid, all-women legal aid center run by women lawyers. She built the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan painstakingly and until her last, she was involved in its work. Not only that, she trained people, hired people. HRCP has a network in all districts of Pakistan where volunteers do human rights defense and tracking. And then she also, as Dina mentioned, she founded the India-Pakistan Peace Initiative. She also co-founded the South Asian Human Rights Commission, which all of these are very tangible institutions and networks that she leaves for Pakistanis, for the young generation. Some of you are here and who will go back to carry forward. It is, she's been called Pakistan's conscience, the moral compass, and all of that is true. But I would think that in terms of her real legacy, it is the courage which we all need to stand up to the tyranny that continues in Pakistan, not just by the state institutions, but by very regressive cultural practices and other kind of unjust systems that we have all grown used to. So with that, I'll end my remarks and thank you once again, and long live Asma Jahangir.
I really got to know Asma through Ayesha, even though my parents had an independent connection to her from India over several decades. Being of the wrong gender, I could at best aspire to hover on the outer periphery of the inner circle of outstanding women activists, academics, and artists, among whom Asma Jahangir was the luminous center. Nevertheless, I had the good fortune of meeting Asma in Lahore, Kolkata, and here in Boston. In each of these geographical locations, Asma appeared in a different incarnation. In her home country, she was the firebrand and fearless vakil of democracy, of women's and minority rights. She had made certain through her life and work that a military dictator, however powerful, would always be regarded as a usurper. When she came to India, and she crossed that Wagha-Atari border many times, she came as a messenger of peace and goodwill. I remember that in September 2004, she came to deliver the Sharat Chandra Bose Memorial Lecture at Netaji Bhavan in Kolkata, a lecture named after my grandfather, who was a barrister and the leader of the Indian freedom struggle. The title of her lecture was Making Friends with Neighbors. Asma Jahangir did not call for peaceful coexistence. She called for an intimate and lasting friendship. A couple of years before that event, my mother had nominated her for the Gandhi Peace Prize, much to the consternation of officialdom in India. "What are you doing, madam?" the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee had to hear. "A Pakistani for the Gandhi Peace Prize?" My mother's recommendation was disregarded, even though I think Gandhi would have been happy if Asma Jahangir had been granted and awarded that Peace Prize. My mother has written a tribute in Bengali to her, which came out last week, and perhaps I shall read the last couple of sentences. আজ ভারত পাক সম্পর্ক এক বিপজ্জনক অবস্থায় দাঁড়িয়ে আছে, নিত্যদিন সীমান্তে হাঙ্গামা ও রক্তপাত চলছে। এই সময় আসমা জাহাঙ্গীরের মতো মুক্তমনা, গণতন্ত্রপ্রেমী, মানবতা দরদী মানুষের একান্ত প্রয়োজন। আসমার অকাল প্রয়াণ ভারতীয় উপমহাদেশের শান্তি ও নিরাপত্তার পথ আরো অনেক দুর্গম করে দিল। And of course, I met her here. She came to the United States as a matchless icon of international human rights. But that was a persona I never quite witnessed. She never behaved like a prima donna. She was the easiest of guests, warm and affectionate, completely at home, away from home. I know that her untimely departure, untimely in more senses than one, has left her sisterhood completely bereft. I have some inkling of the intensity of grief that they are feeling. But we too, her brothers who held her in awe, also feel the void that she has left. I would like to end by reading out to you a translation, my translation of a Tagore poem, because I think you can hear Asma's voice in it. My emancipation is in the effulgence of the sky, my freedom in the specks of dust, the blades of grass. On the distant margins of body and mind, I lose myself. My liberation floats high on the melodies of songs. My freedom is in the center of everyone's affection. My freedom is in the center of everyone's affection, in the challenging missions that defy grief and danger, in the fiery heat of the sacrificial arena of the earth's sustainer. May I offer my life as oblation in freedom's quest.
It's a privilege to be asked to reflect on Asma Jahangir's life and work. Though I never had the opportunity to meet Asma Ji in person, I did become acquainted with her through her advocacy and social justice work. I first heard her name when my aunt gave me a tour of Dastak, a transitional women's shelter in Pakistan. It's a shelter for women who have left situations of domestic abuse. The women and their children leave homes and families under great duress and threat to escape violence and oppression, to start a new life for themselves. Dastak, as you know, means knock, as in to knock on the door. And it is a request for hospitality and welcome. And that is exactly what Asma Ji and her sister Hina provided when they founded Dastak, this women's shelter in Pakistan. At Dastak, the vision was for women to find a place for safety and security as they learned new skills to help them find jobs and independence. As we know, it is not so easy for women to leave their families and live independently in Pakistan. Asma Ji tirelessly worked with foundations, NGOs, and donors to give the women at Dastak a place to learn more about themselves and discover the talents that had been hidden for too long. Each time I visited Pakistan, I would order or purchase items that women had made. My home is filled with cushion covers, embroidered with mirrors and ribbon work. I have kitchen items and textiles that are tie-dyed and batiked. In fact, this kurti that I'm wearing was hand-stitched and hand-beaded. And this shawl was embroidered with Sindhi shishe ka kaam and all exceptional work done by the women at Dastak. I remember sitting and watching the women show me how to dye fabrics with various patterns, and I thought, if these women could work for Western fashion houses, they could be affirmed and compensated greatly for the incredible skills that they possess. Dastak was also an interfaith space for healing. Asma Ji brought Muslim and Christian women together as residents of Dastak and as employed staff. Asma Ji's interfaith awareness extended beyond Dastak to her justice work on behalf of religious minorities, of which I am one. My family is part of the Christian minority in Pakistan, and I would often hear of Christians who are accused of blasphemy and given a death sentence. Asma Ji and other lawyers used their power and privilege, leveraging justice on behalf of those with fewer resources. I believe that she brought greater public awareness to the plight of Christians and other marginalized minorities who are often scapegoats for religious extremists. Asma Ji came from a position of privilege and power and used her connections and her education to tip the scales of justice toward the oppressed. How can we continue her legacy through our lives and our opportunities? This is something that I've been pondering this past week. And how can I follow her example? How can we carry the torch that she's left burning so brightly? Many of us have had access to Western educational institutions, and we have connections. This privilege is respected by political leaders in Pakistan and others in power there. I leave us with a question. How can we gather in the coming days, months, and years to create change through our critical mass, to bring the marginalized to the center, and to promote justice on behalf of the oppressed in Pakistan and beyond, in the spirit and memory of Asma Jahangir.
Celebration and note the deep and genuine gathering of people here today. Suggests that the works of great people make new communities and make older communities new again. I did not have the privilege of knowing Asma Jahangir as well as the rest of you did, but I'm honored to be asked to speak in tribute of her incandescent memory. I speak for Jacqueline, Bhabha, and myself. Had she not been flying to Bombay as we speak, she would have been standing here, not me. And she would have told you, as I have heard her tell repeatedly, of Asma's crucially important interventions in the interests of those who have been rendered voiceless and faceless. And she would have praised Asma, as she has praised Asma frequently, for her fearless vision, her intransigent courage, and her brilliant strategizing in the ongoing struggle against inequality, injustice, discrimination, and war. For my part, I can only offer one thought and a few stanzas from an old and wise poem. The sheer integrity of and dignity of Asma's voice as a feminist, a rights activist, an advocate for democratic dialogue is more resonant and relevant today than ever. And we must remember its resolution and its rectitude ever more urgently when it has been so tragically silenced. We need the truth of Asma's voice as a woman in our attempts to confront the odious phalanx of masculine leaders who impose upon us their tin pot tyrannies, replete with alternative truths and the barbarisms of so-called populism, prejudice, and persecution. There is a kind of tribal nationalism, the phrase is Hannah Arendt's, that thrives in the embodied politics of masculinist supremacy. The 56-inch chest of one leader, the precarious blonde beehive with more bees than a beehive in a bonnet of another. Netanyahu, Duterte, Zuma, let me not further foul this occasion. In times of such incivility, Asma's aspirational political voice teaches us that the struggle never ends. We make some progress, there are some victories, and from the rubble some hopes rise. But the struggle is waged not only against historical circumstance and the external world. The struggle must never end because we, activists, citizens, scholars, we must interiorize the struggle and make it repeatedly part of our own internal ethical vigilance. We do not only struggle against, we struggle for. We struggle against tyranny and untruth because at the end of the day, we struggle for truths and freedoms that we cannot live without. We do not struggle against, we struggle for. And that, I believe, is the vision of poetic justice that W.H. Auden offers us in his poem Spain 1937, from which I offer a few disjointed stanzas. I apologize, to the lasting memory of Asma Jahangir. Yesterday, all the past. The language of sighs spreading to China along the trade routes. The diffusion of the counting frame and the cromlech. Yesterday, the shadow reckoning in the sunny climates. Yesterday, the belief in the absolute value of Greek. The fall of the curtain upon the death of a hero. Yesterday, the prayer to the sunset and the adoration of madmen. But today, the struggle. As the poet whispers amongst the pines, oh, where loose waterfall sings compact or upright on the crag by the leaning tower, oh, my vision, oh, send me the luck of the sailor. Tomorrow, the rediscovery of romantic love, the photographing of ravens, all the fun under liberty's masterful shadow, Tomorrow, the hour of the pageant master and the musician. Tomorrow, for the young, the poets exploding like bombs, the walks by the lake, the winter of perfect communion. Tomorrow, the bicycle races through the suburbs on summer evenings. But today, the struggle. The stars are dead. The animals will not look. We are left alone with our day, and the time is short. And history to the defeated may say, alas, but cannot help or part.
This is a very difficult occasion. I don't think I've ever had this much difficulty saying anything. People who know me know that I'm a very passionate defender of human rights, especially for religious minorities in Pakistan. And in that role, Asma was not just a mentor, she was a mentor of my mentors. In this very room, I have people whom I call mentors, Bina, Raza, Yasser. And Asma was their mentor. She was a mentor of mentors. And no words can suffice to pay tribute to this amazing personality. In Pakistan, the litmus test to speak for the human rights or religious rights, rights for religious freedom for any community, is to speak for the rights of the Ahmadi Muslims. And no one spoke for the rights of Ahmadi Muslims as boldly and bravely as Asma Jahangir did. In 2015, on television, on Pakistani television, when she was asked about her opinion on the Second Amendment of Pakistan, which declares the Ahmadis non-Muslims, she could have been like anyone else and tried to evade the question, because this is one of the most taboo issues in Pakistan. But she stood by principle, and she answered the question and said she was opposed to this Second Amendment, which declared the Ahmadis non-Muslim. Day before yesterday, I was at the Capitol Hill. We had an event that was organized by the Ahmadiyya Muslim Congressional Caucus for the rights of the Rohingya Muslims in Burma. The United States Commission of International Religious Freedom was there. We had congressmen there, and everyone was speaking about the rights of the Rohingya. And the vice chair of the United States Commission of International Religious Freedom, Ms. Christina Aguara, dedicated the whole of her 10-minute speech on Asma Jahangir. And it became more of like a remembrance of Asma Jahangir because she was such a passionate defender of rights of everyone, including the Rohingya Muslims. I wouldn't say much. I just wanted to remember her and be a part of this, and thank you for allowing me to be a part of this. But Asma knew what she was doing. She was very wise, like someone else mentioned. She was very smart, and she also knew what to ignore. I met her once, and I emailed her about 3 times, I think, where I had a response from her. And so you have to remember, I'm in medicine. I'm a cardiologist by profession. So my interactions with her were about human rights or about medicine. And she knew what to ignore very well. I spoke about, I got her opinion about some human rights issues, and twice at the bottom of my email I said, P.S. I love you, but smoking is bad for health. And she would respond to whatever else I had said, but she would totally ignore it. So she was very smart. She was very wise. She was a courageous mother. She was a very humble, kind soul, and I think the best tribute we can pay Asma is to become like Asma. I hope we have many more Asmas in Pakistan in the future. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the organizers of this wonderful meeting. I'd like to thank Mina for inviting me. Can you hear me? I was ambassador to Pakistan, U.S. ambassador to Pakistan from 1996 to 1998. So in the middle of Asma's life. She was still very much a Pakistani figure. She became more international later, but she was a major figure within Pakistan. And I used to go down, when I went down to Lahore from Islamabad, I would try to be with Asma. It didn't always work, but as a result, we met really a number of times. And, she was fearless, so she wasn't afraid of being with the American ambassador. Relations were better then than they have become. So I was hoping it was not going to do her any harm to be with me. I certainly did mean a lot of good to be with her. We would talk about current events. She also introduced me to an older Lahore. The Lahore that she'd grown up in the 50s and 60s, which was a Lahore of, not just of elegance, but of intelligence and tolerance. She talked about the circles in which she and her family moved, including, for instance, Alauddin Maududi, the religious thinker and religious journalist. So it was before the blanket of intolerance descended on so much of Pakistani public life, and that was a lesson for me. She did not hide an undertow, an undercurrent of resentment at what the United States government had done to turn Pakistan into the country that she was combating in so many ways. But it was a relationship that I appreciated and loved. She radiated, she was a small person, people pointed that out. She had a pixie quality to her, you can see from her pictures. But she radiated energy. She radiated intelligence. She radiated courage. We pointed out the fearlessness in the face of power. She radiated honesty, and she radiated integrity. So it was a privilege for me to be with her. She also radiated attachment to Pakistan. There's one of my favorite authors, Karl Kraus, in Vienna. They called him the Heimat Treue Hasser, the faithful hater of the fatherland. And Asma had that quality about her. The attachment to the country where she found so much wrong, in which she spent her life combating. We're all here in America. She's there. She stayed there. She's now there forever. And no country produces only heroes. Not everyone can be a hero. That would be too much to expect. But no country really should do without heroes. Heroes who can give the rest of us, the others, examples of intelligence and courage and integrity and honesty. And Asma was that kind of a hero, and I think we've been hearing from the other speakers how she has transmitted that kind of heroism, how it has created a legacy of it. And I have to tell you, I will share with you my reaction when I heard. My reaction was, Pakistan, you're on your own.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Oh, okay, better. I come to speak of Asma as a friend, as an ardent admirer, and also as a member of her community. Because one thing I feel very strongly about Asma Jahangir is that she created a community around her. She was, in her spirit, a person who, wherever she went, there was a mehfil. And we felt as though we were privileged in being part and parcel of, we've talked so much about her sincerity, her courage. One word that comes to my mind is her authenticity. She was through and through herself and no one else. So in other words, she did not have to speak for women. she personified what the travails were to the women around her, and also provided some solutions to our predicament. I recall meeting Asma, the typical Eid meetings, you know, on Eid you exchange, families go and eat mithai, the same mithai all the time. And she was there, and so I knew her in that familial context before I recognized her as a very rare human being, and someone who could touch the spirit of authenticity in you. I remember, because I used to tend to be idealistic and sometimes airy-fairy, and she would say, you are being, put your feet on the ground. I am walking on the ground, and no nonsense. And that was exactly what I needed to hear. One of the more tender exchanges that we had was when I published my first book. She wrote to me and admired both the vision I had of Pakistan, and she praised the courage of writing as a woman, and also she recognized her complete affinity with me in terms of General Zulu Haq, which I mention frequently in meatless days. And what was more important to me was the fact that when I next went to Lahore, she gave me a book that she'd written and inscribed it in words I will never forget. From Asma, who will never be as good a writer as Sarah. Which, I mean, I bring tears to my eyes because she is incomparable in every way. I would like to stress, along with the great tragedy that she addressed constantly, also her sense of humor. She was very, very much a Lahori and enjoyed a comedy wherever she could find it. I remember once her dear friend Chandi was giving a talk, and Chandi, many of you must have heard it. Chandi was talking about the ubiquitous quality of film music and how in our culture, in the Pakistani culture, there was such a inundation of, should I be quiet for a while? Yeah? A literal saturation of filmy culture. And now I'm quoting Chandi, speaking, giving a lecture, which she says, an example of how much the film world has influenced the way we perceive everyday culture. हजरत जब गए आसमान के ऊपर गए अल्लाह ताला से मिलने तो अल्लाह ताला ने कहा कि हजरत चुप चुप बैठे हो, जरूर कोई बात है। और हजरत ने फरमाया जी पहली मुलाकात है। Asma loved that so much, she would make me repeat it. Every time, overjoyed. Because it meant so much to her. Was her sense of the amalgam that was Pakistan. The tragedy and the comedy, the tyranny and the freedom. And I feel that the strongest tribute we can pay to Asma Jahangir is to, in some slight way, continue her spirit of courage and of authenticity. When I first heard of Asma's death, I was conflicted, obviously, because so many of her friends feared that she would die through an assassination, through some kind of violent attempt on her life. But Asma, being as independent and courageous as she was, she decided when she would die. She'd take it into her own hands. And I would hope that the sense of immediate loneliness that I felt of being bereft this occasion has mitigated. I see it in the faces I know and the faces I don't know. We are all learning a language that is post Asma Jahangir. And I encourage all of us to keep practicing it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all of you for coming here. Thank you, the organizers. I'm glad you decided to change it to celebrating Asma, because I'm certainly not ready to begin to remember someone who's very much alive and well for me in my mind. It's very hard for me to believe that she's not there. I think that closure will only come when I meet Munize, meet TJ, the family. I don't think it's possible sitting so far away. I'm away from my friends. And so I just want to say that I do have a few things to say about how Asma Jahangir should be remembered and how she will be remembered. And then I do want to say that amongst, so many people have spoken about her, she touched so many different lives. And that just sort of tells you what a multifaceted personality she was. But one of the things that nobody has really emphasized, and since I regard myself not just of her tribe, I think I was one of the members of the inner circle, certainly in terms of Pakistan's larger political scene, if not the human rights scene. And so I'd like to say a few things. I think Asma Jahangir was a human being, first and foremost. She also had moments of fear. And I think one needs to understand that what made Asma possible were networks of support provided by her friends, of course the lawyers, and of course the human rights activists, but most importantly by her family, by her husband, by her children. She was a person who had her concerns, worries, anxieties, and yet
she was such a multifaceted person that you could find her at 7:30 in the morning in Gulberg main bazaar buying fish, then protesting at 10 a.m. Outside the Lahore High Courts, and then going to the courts to fight her case, attending a funeral for a human rights activist, and then coming home and getting the house ready for dinner, and then entertaining her friends well into 3 o'clock at night. And if I hadn't been invited earlier, I'd get a call at 12 o'clock and said, "Kya kar rahi hai?" I would say, "I'm working." "Aja, 12:30 at night, I'm sending you the card, come." So, it would go on. And yes, she was incorrigible. I wish she had taken care of herself better. We might have had her for longer. But I do want to talk about what Asma means to us beyond the personal, because she was a national icon. And Asma there, I think, unlike all of you who now have to take on from where she left, has created something that is unstoppable. I think that people will not only benefit from her legacy, but will find that this legacy will only get more effective. So in many ways, I think that in all this talk about the wonders of Asma, and of course she was just wonderful, we must also learn from Asma. One of the most remarkable things about Asma was that she could manage the Byzantine politics of Pakistan, appear in the court, meet her friends, be the supportive friend that she was, and be the great mother that she always was to her children. So all of these factors are major. I don't think that anybody can possibly combine all these facets, and neither should people do so. So I really would hope that the iconic Asma Jahangir will not be turned into yet another national icon of the Pakistani state. I don't want to mention many, but Allama Iqbal comes to mind as the mess they've made of him. So I really would like to say that you need to keep the fact that she was human, humane, fallible, and learn from her and do better than her. And having said that, I think when the canons of Pakistan's democracy are pieced together, and we have a very, they're very weak at the moment, but when they are put together, this wiry, small-framed friend of mine will stand amongst the tallest of the giants. And so, rest in peace, Asma. Rest well. You have earned a permanent place in history. Thank you.
Remembering Asma Jahangir, it's hard to find a measure of Asma Jahangir's greatness. She was a brilliant intellectual, a superb humanist, a great political leader, an epitome of kindness, a personification of indomitable courage. Asma was all these things and much more. Professionally, she excelled as a magnificent lawyer who did more than anyone else I can think of to defend and save helpless people from the unjust wrath of authoritarians and tyrants. As one of the most distinguished human rights lawyers in the world, Asma used her legal knowledge to protect the vulnerable and unimaginably strengthen people's rights. As it happens, Asma's first legal victory came before she became a trained lawyer. She won a great legal battle in freeing her father, Malik Ghulam Gilani, the parliamentarian and critic of the military, who had been unjustly incarcerated by the government. At the time of her victory at the Supreme Court, in a case celebrated as Miss Asma Gilani versus the government of Punjab, unquote, Asma was barely 20 years old. Later, with professional legal training and far-reaching vision, combined with her exceptional intelligence, Asma became the leading defender of human rights in Pakistan in the company of other great human rights activists like Mann and Dora Patel. It's extraordinary to see how much the Pakistan Human Rights Commission has achieved in the cause of justice without even having the firm legal and constitutional status that, say, the Indian or the South African Human Rights Commission can comfortably rely on. Those commissions have a much easier job than the Pakistan Human Rights Commission. But despite that legal hardship, the Pakistan Human Rights Commission has achieved no less, particularly through powerfully mobilizing public opinion and involvement. I personally think that in understanding Asma's success, it's important not only to appreciate the strength of her skilled argument, her trained reasoning, and her deep-rooted courage, but also the tremendous warmth of her personality, including her radiating friendliness. She generated enthusiasm across the world, but particularly on the two sides of the subcontinental divide. Asma was of course loved in Pakistan, but no less in India. And whenever she gave a talk in India, I remember several occasions attending them, the room, whatever its size, was always overfull with people trying to get in. She communicated an amazing closeness that was felt by all. It was her companionable personality, in addition, of course, to the force of her reasoning, which helped her to bring judges, even in most difficult cases, to see her argument with sympathetic clarity. It's amazing how Asma won case after case against what seemed like insurmountable adversity. I personally have been extraordinarily privileged to have Asma as a close friend for nearly 2 decades. I first met her when we were both members of a joint Indo-Pakistani initiative to engage the citizens of the two countries to talk more with each other. Asma was the co-chair of the group, along with the former Prime Minister I.K. Gujral on the Indian side. I was awestruck by the clarity of Asma's mind, as well as her boundless humanity and warmth. We had the chance to talk a great many times in many different places when we met, as we did frequently. But we had the most wonderful opportunity to talk endlessly when she and her wonderful husband, Asma Jahangir, stayed with us at the Master's Lodge of Trinity College in Cambridge. We were often joined by her younger daughter, Sulema. I learned a huge amount from Asma about how to think about one's priorities and duties in the most complex and difficult of circumstances. One of the most fulfilling moments of my life came last year when Asma spoke at the London School of Economics in a lecture named after me. I have not done anything to deserve it, I hasten to add, but LSE does have such an annual series. Asma explained to nearly 1,000 students and teachers at LSE how to fight injustice related to religious intolerance using democratic means, a subject that seems to become more and more important right across the world. Her ideas were buzzing around the LSE for many weeks. Activist lawyers, especially those who lead human rights movements, are often in danger of violent attack by people whose despotism and oppression are threatened. In Shakespeare's Henry VI, Part 2, when Jack Cade, with recently acquired, indeed ill-acquired power, talks about his policy priorities, one of his followers, Dick the Butcher, says, the first thing we do let's kill all the lawyers. Asma had to face many such dictatorships in her committed and dedicated life. But my fearless friend continued to speak, argue, plead, guide, and lead the movement she had founded and built without being at all deterred. Threats and dangers could not stop her, nor could they reduce the force of her reasoning, nor diminish her extraordinary warmth and humanity which captivated all. Even though Asma had left us, we can still not only bask in her glory, but also continue to be guided by what she has taught us, the point that Ayesha was making just a few minutes ago. The angel of humanity may have gone, but the great inspiration and the penetrating education we have got from her are here to stay. At this tragic moment, there is comfort in that thought, and we can have pride in having known so perfect a human being. Thank you.
I left Pakistan in the early 70s, but have been a deep admirer and fan of Asma's work and from everything I know of her personality for a long, long time, and feel the loss of her departure deeply. My only connection may be just that I guess it's a half a degree of separation still. We did exchange a few text messages a couple of years ago about some medical matter. So that's really my only claim to having connected with her. So instead of anecdotes or personal memories, I'm going to read a couple of passages from probably one of the best known Pakistani poets, Urdu poets, named Faiz Ahmad Faiz, who shared not only the city of Lahore with Asma, but also, sorry I keep drifting, but also many of her viewpoints and principles. I've chosen two short segments from a poem of Faiz's titled Shorish Bar Batool Ne. And this is it's a dialectic, in a way. It's referred to as a dialectic of hope in two voices. So it's almost a dialogue. The first voice and the first section I've chosen describes, and I'm not translating it, but for those who don't understand Urdu, I'm just going to say what it's about, which is the pain of destiny, of annihilation, when everything is destroyed and the band plays no more, and the most illustrious and hardworking of pens have been put down forever. So, here's how Faiz says it. गर है यही मसला के शम्सो कमर, इन शम्सो कमर का क्या होगा? गर है यही मसला के शम्सो कमर, इन शम्सो कमर का क्या होगा? रानाई शब का क्या होगा? अंदाज़े सहर का क्या होगा? जब खून जिगर बर्फाब बना, जब आँखें आहन पोश हुईं, इस दीदे तर का क्या होगा? इस ज़ौक़ नज़र का क्या होगा? जब शेर के ख़ैमे राख हुए, नग़मों की तनाबें टूट गईं, ये साज़ कहाँ सर फोड़ेंगे? इस किल के गोहर का क्या होगा? जब कुंज क़फ़स मस्कन ठहरा और जेबो गरेबां तौक़ो रसन, जब कुंज क़फ़स मस्कन ठहरा और जेबो गरेबां तौक़ो रसन, आए कि ना आए मौसम गुल, इस दर्द जिगर का क्या होगा? That last line is beautiful, as many of you know. So that was the first voice, and the second voice responds with much more hope and optimism, with a commitment to truth and justice and integrity, with an effort to take possession of our universe, all of it, with the deepest courage possible, and a commitment to overcome the sounds of war drums with music,
and courage, the kind of courage and bravery that Asma stood by. So here's how Faiz says it. This is the dusri awaz, or the second voice. ये हाथ सलामत हैं जब तक, इस खून में हरारत है जब तक, इस दिल में सदाकत है जब तक, इस नुत्क में ताकत है जब तक, इन तौक़ व सलासिल को हम तुम सिखलाएंगे शोरिश बरबतो नैन, वो शोरिश जिसके आगे ज़बूं हंगामे तबले कैसरो कै, आज़ाद हैं अपने फ़िक्र व अमल, भरपूर खजीना हिम्मत का, एक उम्र है अपनी हर साथ, इमरोज़ है अपना हर फरदा। ये शाम व सहर, ये शम्स व कमर, ये अख्तर व कौकब अपने हैं, ये लौह व कलम, ये तबलो अलम, ये मालो हशम, सब अपने हैं. So the young people in this audience, go forward, carry the torch. This last was all about you people going forward and carrying Asma's work forward. Thank you so much, Mira.
So I don't really have much to add to what people have said here. I know that there's a lot of people here who want to also say something about Asma. And I think it's kind of going to be difficult to accommodate all of that. But like Yasser said before, I'm doing what you were doing. Like what Yasser said and we said before, you've got the index cards there, and if people can write down on those index cards that are on the counters in front of you, what you think, any thoughts you'd like to share, any ways to take things forward beyond that. And also, I think we have a video, we have volunteers here who would love to record what people say, but it's, when I spoke to Afrasiab Khatak after Asma's final journey, and as you know, thousands had attended her funeral, and he said that we have a saying in Pashto, that when you share your grief, it becomes half, and when you share your happiness, it trebles. So that's the spirit also of this gathering, because I think when we heard about Asma's passing, I think so many people have been so intensely moved, and I think we have a little bit of time actually, and I know that I don't know how to actually conclude this evening, to be honest, because I've heard people here say, I didn't know her, but I've been just so shocked, and I've spoken to people who've not been able to stop crying because even though they've never met her. So Asma is, so I think I will maybe conclude by saying Asma is maybe also an idea. She represents, I think, as Ayesha said and as Amartya said, like the things that she stood for, across all these issues that she worked with, the blasphemy laws, the blasphemy on which I worked with her as well, where we found that every place you went where there was a blasphemy, so-called blasphemy case, behind it was some kind of some malafide motive. It wasn't just blasphemy. It's not about religion. It's about power. And as so many people have said, used this phrase, she spoke truth to power, and you cut through that. You cut through the so-called blasphemy issue, and behind it is a thing for power. And her quest for India-Pakistan. One thing I want to really say about India-Pakistan, Amartya Sen also said it, other people also said it. People talked about her sense of fun and all that, and one of the reasons we have flowers and we started with music and all that, so because she really loved all that. She really loved, and she always a lot of the times wore very colorful clothes, and when she went to India and she met Bhabha, she happened to be wearing orange, a color that she often wore, and then he was wearing the same color, and that was used as a kind of propaganda against her. But when they had the Women's Peace bus that somebody referred to earlier, when the bus came to Lahore and when she led a bus of women to India, they met each other singing and dancing. They presented bangles and shawls the traditional signs of weakness, they said, like if they say that, oh, you're so weak, let me give you bangles. And Asma made it a sign of strength. And she gave this amazing lecture, keynote speech in the UC California, San Diego, where she talked about the importance of bringing women to the negotiating table and having women at the center of the peace issues. So these are some of the things, the blasphemy law, and the free will marriages cases that she took up, where women who wanted to get, couples who were trying to get married, and Asma took up their right, and she won a lot of those cases. And I think what both the authors talked very eloquently about her bar politics. And we can conclude by, how about I just stop talking and people can just hang out and meet each other and share their thoughts. And this is just a tribute to somebody who we hope will keep inspiring us and help us to take our work and her work forward. Thank you.
ताबीर है जिसकी